His casual attendance at the military event as a corporate sponsor turned into a nightmare when her name was announced. His body froze in disbelief as she confidently strode onto the stage in full military regalia with two identical boys in matching formal outfits. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The pregnancy test trembled in Sofia Martinez's hands as she stared at the two pink lines. Standing in the luxurious bathroom of Robert Cunningham's Beacon Hill apartment, the 27-year-old nurse felt her heart race. The marble countertop felt cold beneath her fingertips as she steadied herself, watching snowflakes swirl outside the frost-edged window. "It's positive," she whispered to her reflection, a mixture of fear and hope crossing her features. She and Robert had been together for 18 months, a whirlwind romance that began when he spotted her at a hospital charity gala shortly after she'd started working there. Their connection had seemed improbable. The heir to Cunningham Industries, one of the largest tech companies on the East Coast, falling for a newly graduated nurse with Mexican roots. Yet Robert had pursued her relentlessly, showering her with affection and promises of a future together. Sofia tucked the test into her pocket and headed to the kitchen. She would prepare his favorite breakfast, a Spanish omelet with fresh herbs and goat cheese, before sharing the news. Her hands moved with practiced precision, chopping vegetables while her mind wandered to the night before. "I love you unconditionally, Sofia," Robert had whispered as they lay entangled in his Egyptian cotton sheets. "You've brought something real into my life." The memory gave her courage as she heard the front door open. Robert entered, his tall frame wrapped in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. His tie, navy silk with subtle pinstripes, was loosened slightly at his neck. "The Parker meeting was a nightmare," he announced, dropping his briefcase on the counter. "The acquisition terms are completely unreasonable. I need a drink, not breakfast." Sofia placed the omelet on the table anyway. "I made your favorite. Maybe some food will help." Robert sighed, checking his phone messages. "Fine. What's that look about? You seem different this morning." Sofia took a deep breath, her fingers finding the plastic test in her pocket. "Robert, I have something to tell you." She placed the pregnancy test on the table beside his plate. "We're going to have a baby." She'd imagined this moment differently, perhaps surprise followed by joy, maybe even tears of happiness. Instead, Robert stared at the test with the cold calculation of an executive reviewing an unfavorable contract. His blue eyes narrowed, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "This is a problem you'll have to solve on your own, Sofia," he said finally, tossing the test back toward her as if rejecting a business proposal. The plastic clattered against her plate. "What?" "I'm being very clear." His voice took on the same tone he used for dismissing inefficient employees. "This isn't part of our arrangement." "Arrangement?" Sofia's voice caught. "Robert, this is our child. Last night you said you loved me unconditionally. Love is one thing, business is another." He adjusted his navy tie, smoothing it back into place. "My path to the top of Cunningham Industries doesn't include a family, especially not with someone of your limitations." The word limitations echoed through the room like a slap. Sofia, daughter of Mexican immigrants, had earned her education through scholarships and relentless work. Her nursing degree was her family's pride. She was the first to complete college. "What limitations?" she asked, her voice finding unexpected firmness. Robert looked at her with something between pity and contempt. "Don't be naive, Sofia. Do you think my parents, my investors, my social circle would accept a Latina without a Harvard degree as the mother of the next Cunningham? This is a world where lineage and connections matter. You were a pleasant interlude, but never a future." Each word struck like a physical blow. The breakfast she'd prepared with such hope sat untouched between them, steam still rising from the omelet. "You can't mean that," she whispered, tears forming. "We talked about traveling together. maybe even living abroad for a while. You introduced me to your friends. As my girlfriend, yes, not as the mother of my children." Robert's face remained impassive. "The Cunningham bloodline has maintained certain standards for generations." "Standards?" Sophia's voice cracked. "You mean whiteness and wealth?" Robert didn't deny it. Instead, he pulled out his phone, tapped the screen several times and set it down. "I've just transferred $10,000 to your account. It's enough for your expenses or to resolve the problem. Choose wisely." The clinical way he referred to their child as a problem made her stomach turn. "I won't abort our baby," she declared, tears now streaming down her face. "Then this is goodbye." Robert pressed a button on the intercom by the kitchen wall. "Samuel, I need you to escort Miss Martinez out. She won't be returning." Within minutes, the building's security guard appeared at the apartment door, visibly uncomfortable with his assignment. Samuel had always greeted Sophia warmly during the months she'd been coming to Robert's apartment, sometimes bringing homemade cookies for the staff. "Mr. Cunningham?" Samuel questioned hesitantly. "Please ensure Miss Martinez leaves the premises immediately. She's no longer welcome here." Sophia stood frozen, unable to comprehend how the man who had held her so tenderly just hours before could now treat her like an intruder. "I'll need to collect some things," she managed to say. Robert nodded curtly. "Make it quick." With trembling hands, Sophia gathered a few belongings from the bathroom and bedroom, a toothbrush, some clothes, a book she'd been reading. Most of her possessions remained at her own small apartment, which she'd kept despite spending most nights with Robert. That modest foresight now seemed like divine intervention. As she packed her phone charger into her purse, Robert stood in the doorway, watching impassively. For a moment she thought she saw conflict in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "A Latina without a Harvard degree will never be suitable to carry the Cunningham legacy," were his final words as the door closed behind her. Samuel escorted her to the elevator, his expression sympathetic. "Miss Martinez, I'm so sorry. Is there someone I can call for you?" Sophia shook her head, clutching her small bag of hastily collected belongings. "Thank you, Samuel. I'll be fine." But she wasn't fine. The following weeks became a nightmare of cascading crises. Unable to focus on work, her performance at the hospital suffered. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, the hospital where the Cunningham family was a major donor suddenly placed her on probation, citing performance issues that had never existed before. 2 months later, she found herself sleeping on a colleague's couch, working 2 jobs, as a substitute nurse during the day and a pharmacy attendant at night. In the few hours of rest she managed, Sophia cried herself to sleep, her hand resting on her growing belly. In her 4th month of pregnancy came another shock. Twins. The ultrasound showed 2 tiny hearts beating, defying all odds. When the technician asked if the father would want to know, Sophia simply shook her head. "There is no father in the picture," she said quietly. The technician nodded with professional sympathy, pointing to the screen. "Well, these 2 little ones are perfectly healthy. You're doing great." It was in that examination room, seeing her children for the first time, that something shifted inside Sophia. A fierce determination replaced her despair. She would not be defined by Robert Cunningham's rejection. That night, she wrote in her journal, "My children will not grow up feeling they're not enough. I will prove Robert wrong about everything. Not for revenge, but for justice. To show Matthew and Michael that their origin does not determine their destiny." As her pregnancy advanced, Sophia was forced to leave her night job. When she could no longer hide her belly beneath loose scrubs, the hospital fired her, citing budget cuts. Sophia knew the truth. The Cunninghams controlled those doors too. On that cold sidewalk outside Robert's Beacon Hill luxury building, as tears froze on her face, Sophia couldn't possibly imagine that one day she would face Robert Cunningham again, not as a discarded nurse, but as a decorated officer whose decisions could affect the empire he valued more than his own humanity. The eviction notice was thin, just a single sheet of paper, but it might as well have been made of lead as Sophia clutched it in her trembling hand. She had known this was coming. 3 months of late rent payments had stretched her landlord's patience beyond its limits. Standing in her small apartment's kitchenette, morning sickness swirling in her stomach, she read the formal language demanding she vacate the premises within 30 days. 30 days, she whispered to the empty room. Where am I supposed to go? She placed a protective hand over her slightly rounded belly. At 16 weeks pregnant with twins, her scrubs no longer concealed her condition. That morning, she'd caught her supervisor's eyes lingering on her midsection, a frown forming on her face. As if summoned by the thought, Sophia's phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. Meeting with Dr. Whitman at 2 p.m., mandatory attendance. Something in her gut told her this wasn't going to be good. The timing was too coincidental. Since Robert had thrown her out of his life, strange things had been happening at Boston Memorial. Shifts she'd been promised disappeared from her schedule. Colleagues who had once been friendly now avoided eye contact. And Dr. Whitman, the department head, had never once requested a one-on-one meeting with a junior nurse like her. When Sophia arrived at the hospital that afternoon, the administrative wing felt cold and unwelcoming. Dr. Whitman's assistant barely acknowledged her before ushering her into the spacious office decorated with medical degrees and hospital donor recognition plaques. Her eyes caught on one particular name etched in gold: Cunningham Family Foundation, Platinum Benefactor. Dr. Whitman didn't stand when she entered. "Miss Martinez, please sit down." The conversation that followed was brief and devastating. "We've received some concerns about your performance," he said, sliding a folder across his mahogany desk. Inside was a performance evaluation Sophia had never seen before, filled with vague criticisms. Lacks focus, not meeting department standards, inconsistent patient care. "But I've never received any of these complaints before," Sophia protested, her voice tight. "My previous evaluations were all positive." Dr. Whitman's expression remained impassive. "Things change, Miss Martinez. People's work sometimes suffers when they become distracted by personal matters." His eyes flicked briefly to her midsection. "You're putting me on probation because I'm pregnant?" Sophia asked incredulously. "I'm putting you on probation because your work doesn't meet our standards," he replied coolly. "Your personal situation is none of my concern. You have 30 days to show significant improvement, or we'll have to reconsider your position." As she left his office, Sophia passed the hospital's main lobby, where a newly installed donor wall prominently featured the Cunningham Industries logo. The company had apparently just funded a new pediatric wing. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Robert's reach was longer than she'd imagined. He hadn't just removed her from his life. He was systematically destroying the life she'd built for herself. That night, as she cleared out her locker, tears blurring her vision, she noticed a pharmacy across the street with a "Help Wanted" sign. Without hesitation, she crossed over and filled out an application. "When can you start?" asked the manager, a tired-looking woman in her 50s. "Immediately," Sophia replied. "I can work any hours, including overnight shifts." 3 days later, she started working as an overnight pharmacy assistant while still trying to maintain her daytime nursing shifts. The double workload was punishing. Her feet swelled painfully in her shoes. Morning sickness became all-day nausea. Dark circles formed under her eyes as sleep became a luxury she could rarely afford. By her 5th month of pregnancy, Sophia was counting coins to buy prenatal vitamins. After paying what she could toward her final month's rent, she barely had enough for food. Her co-worker Jen offered her couch as a temporary solution. "Just until you find a place," Jen said kindly, helping Sophia move her few belongings into her small apartment. The couch was too short for Sophia's 5'7" frame, and her growing belly made finding a comfortable position impossible. She kept a plastic bucket beside her makeshift bed for the frequent bouts of nausea that woke her at odd hours. The walls were thin, and she tried desperately to muffle her retching so as not to disturb Jen. During her shifts at the pharmacy, Sophia would stand for hours, fighting waves of exhaustion. Her ankles ballooned and her back screamed in protest. Customers rarely noticed the pregnant woman behind the counter, her face pale with fatigue, discreetly placing her hand on her lower back for support between transactions. At Boston Memorial, Dr. Whitman watched her like a hawk, documenting every minute she was late, every momentary hesitation in her duties. The countdown on her probation ticked away like a time bomb. On a cold morning in her 24th week, Sophia headed to a community clinic for her prenatal checkup. She couldn't afford to miss work for doctor's appointments, so she scheduled them during the 4-hour gap between her night shift at the pharmacy and her day shift at the hospital. Running on less than 2 hours of sleep, she lay alone on the examination table, holding her own hand. "Let's have a look at this baby," the ultrasound technician said cheerfully, squirting cold gel on Sophia's exposed belly. The wand moved across her skin, and the screen flickered to life. The technician's eyebrows rose. "Oh, did you know you're having twins?" Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "What?" "Yes, look here." The technician pointed to the screen. "Here's baby number 1, and over here, see this? That's baby number 2. 2 separate amniotic sacs, 2 placentas, fraternal twins." Sophia stared at the screen in disbelief. 2 tiny forms floated in their separate dark spaces, small hearts visibly beating. 2 babies. Twins. "Would the father like to know?" the technician asked, glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in. Sophia slowly shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "There's no father in the picture." The technician's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry. But look how healthy they both are. Strong heartbeats, good size for 24 weeks. Sophia couldn't take her eyes off the screen. 2 babies. Double the responsibility. Double the love. Double the proof of what Robert had thrown away. In that moment, something shifted inside her. The despair that had been her constant companion since that fateful morning in Robert's apartment began to transform into something harder, more resilient. These children, her children, would not be defined by their father's rejection. That evening, sitting on Jen's couch with a bowl of instant ramen, Sophia opened the journal she'd been keeping since her pregnancy began. With steady hands, she wrote, "My children will not grow up feeling they're not enough. I will prove Robert wrong about everything. Not for revenge, but for justice, to show Matthew and Michael that their origin does not determine their destiny." She had already chosen their names: Matthew, gift of God, and Michael, who is like God. Names of strength and worth. Names that would remind them daily that they were wanted, valued, loved. As her pregnancy advanced, hiding her condition became impossible. The baggy scrubs could no longer conceal her growing twins. One morning, exactly 30 days after her probation began, Dr. Whitman called her into his office again. "Miss Martinez, I'm afraid we have to let you go," he said without preamble. "Budget cuts have forced us to eliminate several positions, and given your performance issues, your position is among them." Sophia didn't bother arguing. They both knew the real reason. The Cunninghams controlled these doors too. Her night job at the pharmacy became her only source of income until her growing belly made standing for 8-hour shifts impossible. The manager was sympathetic but firm. They needed someone who could handle the physical demands of the job. By her 7th month, Sophia was truly desperate. Her savings were depleted. Jen was patient but couldn't support them indefinitely. The twins were growing rapidly, pressing against her ribs, making every breath a conscious effort. It was at the community clinic, where she'd found a few hours of work filing medical records, that Sophia first saw the military recruiter. He was there to discuss healthcare opportunities in the armed forces with the clinic staff. As he spoke about the benefits, complete medical coverage, housing allowances, career advancement, education opportunities, Sophia found herself listening intently. After his presentation, she approached him with questions. The Army needed medical professionals. They offered programs for single parents. After the birth, she could enlist, bringing her children into the military family system. For the first time in months, Sophia saw a path forward. While sitting on that cold sidewalk outside Robert's Beacon Hill luxury building, as tears froze on her face, Sophia couldn't possibly imagine that her decision to approach that military recruiter would be the first step on a journey that would transform her from a discarded nurse into one of the most decorated medical officers of her generation. A transformation that would one day leave Robert Cunningham speechless. The harsh fluorescent lights of the Human Resources office made Sophia's skin look even paler than it had become in recent weeks. She sat rigidly in the uncomfortable plastic chair, her 7-month pregnant belly straining against her scrubs, as the hospital administrator avoided meeting her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ms. Martinez, but we simply don't have a position for you anymore," he said, sliding the termination paperwork across the desk. "Budget cuts, you understand." Sophia understood perfectly. The hospital's largest donor's name, Cunningham, gleamed from the plaque on the wall behind him. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the twins shifted restlessly, as if sensing her distress. "Will there be severance pay?" she asked quietly, already knowing the answer. The administrator cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Unfortunately, given the circumstances of your probationary status, no severance package is available." As she walked through the hospital corridors for the last time, Sophia noticed a custodian removing her name tag from her locker. 7 years of education, thousands of hours of training and dedication, all erased in an instant, all because she'd made the mistake of loving a man who saw her as disposable. The community clinic in East Boston was a stark contrast to the gleaming facilities of Boston Memorial. Paint peeled from the walls, and the waiting room chairs were patched with duct tape. But Dr. Ramirez, a kind-eyed woman in her 60s who ran the place, had offered Sophia a few hours of work each week. Not enough to live on, but enough to keep her medical skills sharp while she figured out her next steps. "These patients have no insurance," Dr. Ramirez explained as Sophia helped organize patient files. "Many are undocumented. We do what we can with what we have." Sophia found herself drawing strength from the work. Unlike Boston Memorial's wealthy clientele, these patients reminded her of her own parents, hard-working immigrants who had sacrificed everything to give their children opportunities they never had. Her mother had cleaned houses. Her father had worked construction. Both had pushed Sophia to study, to become the first in their family to graduate college. What would they think of her situation now? Pregnant, abandoned, nearly homeless. Shame burned in her chest, but she pushed it down. This was not her failure. It was Robert's. On a Tuesday afternoon, while Sophia was updating vaccination records, a tall man in a crisp army uniform entered the clinic. He carried a stack of brochures and a confident smile that seemed out of place in the shabby surroundings. "Captain James Wilson, U.S. Army Medical Recruitment," he introduced himself to the staff. "Mind if I leave some information? The Army is actively seeking healthcare professionals." As the day's patients dwindled, Captain Wilson gave an informal presentation to the small clinic staff. Sophia found herself lingering at the edge of the group, listening intently. "The U.S. Army offers unparalleled opportunities for medical professionals," Wilson explained. "Full medical coverage, housing allowances, competitive salaries, and career advancement. Plus, we'll help pay for additional education and specialization." When the others drifted away, Sophia approached him hesitantly. "What about single parents? I'm expecting twins in less than 2 months." Captain Wilson's eyes flickered briefly to her belly, but his professional demeanor never wavered. "The Army has robust support systems for military families, including single parents. After your children are born and you've recovered, you could enlist. Your children would be covered under TRICARE, our healthcare system, and you'd receive housing appropriate for a family." He handed her a brochure titled "Military Families, Support and Services." "Think about it," he said kindly. "It's not an easy life, but it provides stability and opportunities that are hard to match in the civilian world, especially for someone in your situation." That night, on Jen's couch, Sophia read the brochure from cover to cover, highlighting passages about child care centers on military bases, family housing allowances, and educational benefits. For the first time since Robert's rejection, she saw a possible path forward, not just survival, but a chance to thrive. October brought crisp air and early sunsets to Boston. In the small examination room of the community clinic, Sophia lay on the table, her enormous belly exposed to the cool air. Dr. Ramirez moved the ultrasound wand carefully. "Both boys are in perfect position," she said with a smile. "Any day now, I'd say." Sophia nodded, a mixture of excitement and terror washing over her. The twins would arrive soon, and she still had so many uncertainties. Her tia Elena was coming from Mexico to help with the babies, the only family member Sophia had told about her situation. The shame of telling her parents was still too great to bear. "Have you decided on names?" Dr. Ramirez asked. "Matthew and Michael," Sophia replied without hesitation. She'd chosen them months ago, strong names with meaning, names that spoke of worth and value. 3 days later, in the early hours of a frosty morning, Sophia's water broke. Jen drove her to Massachusetts General Hospital, where she was admitted immediately. The labor was long and difficult. Without a partner to hold her hand or whisper encouragement, Sophia gripped the bed rails until her knuckles turned white, focusing on Dr. Ramirez's steady voice guiding her through each contraction. After 17 hours, at 2:43 in the morning, Matthew arrived with a lusty cry. 2 minutes later, Michael followed, his wails joining his brother's in perfect harmony. When the nurse placed them on Sophia's chest, she gasped at the sight of their identical faces and their startlingly blue eyes. Robert's eyes. "They're beautiful," the nurse said, helping Sophia position them for their first feeding. "The father must be very proud." Sophia looked down at her sons, their tiny hands curled against her skin. "There is no father," she said firmly, "just a mother who will be enough for both of them." The nurse's expression shifted to one of practiced neutrality as she made a note on the chart. "We'll need information for the birth certificates. Father's name?" Sophia met her gaze steadily. "There is no father. Leave it blank." 6 months passed in a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and endless feedings. Tia Elena proved invaluable, caring for the twins with the experienced hands of a woman who had raised 5 children of her own. She never asked about the father, accepting Sophia's brief explanation that he was not a good man without pressing for details. The tiny apartment they'd managed to rent with Sophia's dwindling savings was barely big enough for one adult, let alone 2 women and 2 infants. But they made it work, converting the single bedroom into a nursery and taking turns sleeping on the pull-out couch. Every week, Sophia called Captain Wilson with questions about enlisting. She worked tirelessly to regain her physical fitness, doing push-ups and sit-ups while the twins napped, jogging with the double stroller when the weather permitted. The military's physical requirements were stringent, but Sophia was determined to meet them. On a crisp spring morning, with the twins now 6 months old, Sophia signed the enlistment papers. She would report for basic training in 2 weeks. Tia Elena had agreed to care for Matthew and Michael during the 10 weeks Sophia would be away, and then they would all relocate to wherever she was stationed. The night before she left for basic training, Sophia sat between the twins' cribs, watching them sleep. Matthew clutched a small stuffed elephant. Michael had kicked off his blankets as usual. Both had their father's blue eyes, but Sophia saw her own determination in the set of their tiny jaws. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered, gently replacing Michael's blanket. "Everything is for you now. I promise I'll build a life that makes you proud." She touched each of their soft cheeks, tears slipping down her face. "One day when he looks at you, he'll see everything he threw away, and when he looks at me, he'll see the woman he never had the courage to truly love." As she kissed their foreheads one last time before her departure, Sophia couldn't know that her oath to serve her country would be just the first step of a journey that would transform her from a rejected nurse into one of the most respected medical officers of her generation, a transformation that would one day render Robert Cunningham speechless. The military bus rumbled over gravel roads carrying Sophia and 30 other recruits toward Fort Jackson. Mud splattered the windows as rain poured down, matching the tears she fought to contain. 6 hours had passed since she'd kissed the twins goodbye, their sleeping faces unaware their mother would be absent for 10 grueling weeks. Tia Elena had promised to send photos daily, but the separation already felt like an open wound. "First time away from your kids?" asked a woman beside her, noticing Sophia's reddened eyes. Sophia nodded, unable to trust her voice. "Mine too. Got a 4-year-old back home. I'm Diaz, Medical Corps." "Martinez," Sophia replied. "Nursing background. Twins, 6 months old." Diaz whistled softly. "Twins and basic training? You're either crazy or the toughest woman I've ever met." "Maybe both," Sophia answered, finding her first smile of the day. The bus lurched to a stop, and reality struck with the thunderous voice of Drill Sergeant Reynolds, a compact woman whose presence seemed to double her physical size. "Welcome to the United States Army, civilians. You have exactly 30 seconds to get off my bus and form a line. Move!" What followed was a blur of shouted orders, running bodies, and controlled chaos. Sophia's civilian clothes were exchanged for uniforms, her long black hair shorn to regulation length, and her identity seemingly stripped away, replaced by Recruit Martinez, or simply, "You there." The physical demands began immediately. Despite months of preparation, Sophia found herself struggling to complete the required push-ups, her arms trembling under the strain. "Martinez! My grandmother pushes harder than that and she's been dead for 10 years!" Sergeant Reynolds bellowed. "You think the enemy waits for you to catch your breath?" Collapsing into her bunk that first night, muscles screaming in protest, Sophia pulled out the small photo of Matthew and Michael she'd been allowed to keep. "I can do this," she whispered to their smiling faces. "For you, I can do anything." Days blurred into weeks of pre-dawn wake-ups, endless physical training, weapons instruction, and classroom learning. Sophia's body, still recovering from childbirth, protested the punishing regime. Blisters formed and broke on her feet, her hands calloused from climbing ropes and crawling under barbed wire. The obstacle course became her personal nemesis, particularly the 8-foot wall that seemed insurmountable to her 5'7" frame. 3 times she attempted to scale it. 3 times she fell back into the mud. "You're overthinking it, Martinez," Sergeant Reynolds said, unexpectedly appearing beside her as Sophia stared at the wall during a rare moment of free time. "Stop seeing the top. Focus on the next handhold, the next foothold, one move at a time." The next day, Sophia cleared the wall for the first time, collapsing on the other side with mud-splattered triumph. During their 5th week of training, disaster struck during a field exercise. Staff Sergeant Peterson, a 40-year veteran who supervised their combat first aid training, suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed mid-demonstration. "He's having a heart attack!" someone shouted as recruits froze in panic. Sophia's nursing instincts overrode her recruit status. She dropped to her knees beside him, checking his pulse and finding it irregular and weak. "I need a defibrillator now," she commanded, tearing open his shirt and beginning chest compressions. "Diaz, rescue breathing on my count. Someone time these compressions." For 12 critical minutes, Sophia directed the emergency response, performing textbook CPR until the defibrillator arrived from the medical station. After administering the shock, she continued compressions until Peterson finally gasped and his pulse stabilized. Later that evening, Captain Hodges, the training company commander, called Sophia to his office. "The medics tell me Staff Sergeant Peterson would have died without your intervention," he said, studying her with newfound respect. "Where did you learn to command a medical emergency like that?" "Boston Memorial, sir. I was an ER nurse before enlisting." He nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you showed exceptional leadership under pressure today, recruit. The Army needs medical personnel who can think clearly in chaos." He made a note in her file. "We'll be watching your progress with interest." Word of Sophia's actions spread through the training cadre. Instructors who had previously seen her as just another struggling recruit now observed her with evaluating eyes. In classroom settings, her medical knowledge quickly distinguished her from peers, and her quiet competence in crisis scenarios drew notice. During Week 8, Colonel Richardson, the Fort Jackson Hospital commander, personally visited their training company. "We've heard about Recruit Martinez," he told Captain Hodges within Sophia's earshot. "We'd like to fast-track her for combat medical specialist training after basic. Her background combined with what we're seeing here suggests significant potential." Each small victory strengthened Sophia's resolve. Each recognition was a silent rebuttal to Robert's dismissal of her worth. The woman he had deemed inadequate was earning the respect of military leaders who had commanded thousands. Through it all, Sophia lived for the precious 10 minutes each evening when she could call Tia Elena and hear about the twins. Their first teeth were coming in. Michael had started rolling over. Matthew had discovered his laugh. Each milestone missed was another coal fueling the fire of her determination. "They're growing so fast," Tia Elena said during one call. "Michael looks more like you every day, but those eyes—" "I know," Sophia interrupted, not wanting to hear whose eyes her sons had inherited. "Are they sleeping through the night yet?" The twins were adapting to life without their mother's constant presence, a reality that brought Sophia both relief and heartache. The military daycare system would become their second home once she completed training. Graduation day arrived with a crisp autumn breeze. Standing at attention in her dress uniform, Sophia felt transformed, not just physically, with her newly muscled frame and confident posture, but fundamentally. The woman who had broken down on Robert Cunningham's doorstep no longer existed. Tia Elena attended the ceremony with the twins, now 8 months old and curiously observing the formations of soldiers from their stroller. When Sophia was finally released to greet her family, she dropped to her knees before her sons, drinking in their changed faces. "They know you," Tia Elena assured as the babies reached for Sophia with excited squeals. "I show them your picture every day, tell them stories about their brave mama." That night, in the first hotel room she'd stayed in since before the twins' birth, Sophia watched her sons sleep. Matthew had somehow acquired a military-style crawl, inching across the bed with determination. Michael had developed a solemn watchfulness, observing everything with analytical intensity. Both already showed distinct personalities that had blossomed in her absence. "Private Martinez," she whispered to herself, touching the insignia on her uniform. It was just the beginning, a first small step on the path she was determined to climb. 2 days later, Sophia received her orders. Combat medical specialist training at Fort Sam Houston, followed by assignment to the 28th Combat Support Hospital. She and the twins would relocate to Texas, where military family housing awaited them. As she packed their meager belongings, a notification arrived from her bank. Her first military paycheck had been deposited. It wasn't much, but it was stable, guaranteed income with benefits that included everything her children would need. Kissing each sleeping twin, Sophia whispered, "We have a future now, a real one, built on my terms." While guardedly tucking the children's drawings into her military duffel bag, Sophia didn't realize that her first mission in Afghanistan would not only test her courage, but would also forge the exceptional officer who would one day make Robert Cunningham pale before an audience of generals and politicians. Heat shimmered above the Afghan desert like a living entity, distorting the landscape into wavering mirages. Sophia Martinez squinted against the relentless sun, adjusting the medical pack on her shoulders as she followed her unit toward the forward operating base that would be her home for the next 6 months. 3 years had passed since she'd first donned the uniform, and now, as a combat medical specialist, she was deploying to one of the most volatile regions in Afghanistan. "First deployment, Martinez?" asked Staff Sergeant Coleman, noticing her careful study of their surroundings. "Yes, Sergeant," she replied, her voice steady despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. Leaving 5-year-old Matthew and Michael had been even harder than she'd imagined. Their little faces had been stoic at the departure ceremony, already showing the resilience they'd inherited from her. But Michael's bottom lip had trembled when she'd knelt to hug them one last time. "You've got kids, right?" Coleman asked as they trudged through the dust. "Twin boys." Coleman nodded respectfully. "Toughest job in the Army, being a parent and a soldier, but you're with the 28th CSH now. We look after our own." The 28th Combat Support Hospital was renowned for its medical excellence under fire. Sophia had worked tirelessly to secure this assignment, knowing it would test her skills and accelerate her advancement. 3 days after arrival, that test came without warning. The first mortar hit just after midnight, shaking the plywood walls of the medical facility where Sophia was organizing supplies. The second landed closer, and the third closer still, a deliberate walking of fire toward the base. "Incoming wounded!" The shout preceded the chaos that erupted as Humvees screeched to a halt outside, disgorging soldiers with injuries ranging from minor shrapnel wounds to catastrophic trauma. Sophia's training took over. Her hands moved with practiced precision, establishing IVs, applying pressure bandages, assessing triage priorities with clinical detachment. The metallic scent of blood mingled with dust and gunpowder as more casualties arrived. "Martinez, Bay 3, called Dr. Levinson, the trauma surgeon who had taken Sophia under his wing. "GSW to the femoral artery." She rushed to the gurney where a young soldier lay gray-faced, blood pumping from his thigh despite the hasty tourniquet. Without hesitation, Sophia cut away his uniform, located the bleeder, and applied direct pressure while calling for plasma and O-negative blood. "Hang in there, specialist," she told him, meeting his terrified eyes. "We've got you." Hours blurred together under the harsh fluorescent lights. Sophia worked without rest, moving from one patient to another, her scrubs progressively more blood-soaked, her movements becoming automatic through exhaustion. As dawn broke, bringing temporary respite from the attacks, Captain Brooks, the head nurse, found Sophia suturing a laceration by the light of a battery-powered lamp during a generator failure. "Perfect stitches even in this light," Brooks observed, studying Sophia's work. "Where did you train before the Army?" "Boston Memorial," Sophia answered, tying off the last stitch. "ER and trauma." Brooks nodded thoughtfully. "It shows. Get some rest if you can. Intelligence says the insurgents are regrouping. We'll likely have more incoming by nightfall." Sophia managed 2 hours of fitful sleep before alarms blared again. This time the attack was more coordinated, RPGs targeting the base's defensive positions, followed by small arms fire from multiple directions. In the midst of treating the fresh wave of casualties, the base commander's voice crackled over the radio. "We have a man down in the north perimeter. Sniper fire preventing medevac approach." Captain Brooks looked around the treatment facility, her eyes settling on Sophia. "Martinez, you're our fastest field medic. Take Miller and see if you can reach him." Without hesitation, Sophia grabbed her aid bag and tactical gear. As she and Corporal Miller prepared to dash across the exposed 50 meters of open ground separating them from the wounded soldier, she had a fleeting thought of the twins, their small faces in the photo tucked inside her body armor. "Ready on your mark," Miller said, adjusting his helmet. Sophia took a deep breath. 3, 2, 1, go! They sprinted across the dusty ground as bullets kicked up dirt around them. Halfway to their objective, Miller took a round to the shoulder and went down. Sophia dragged him behind a concrete barrier, quickly assessed his wound as non-life-threatening, and pressed on alone. The wounded soldier lay bleeding behind a partially collapsed wall, his leg mangled by an explosion. Even from several feet away, Sophia could see the arterial bleeding that would kill him within minutes without intervention. She covered the final distance in a crouching run, bullets ricocheting off the rubble around her. Dropping beside him, she immediately applied a combat tourniquet above the catastrophic wound. "You're gonna see your family again, I promise," she told him as she worked, her voice calm despite the rounds impacting nearby. The soldier's eyes were unfocused from blood loss, but he gripped her arm with surprising strength. "Got kids," he mumbled. "Me too," Sophia replied, starting an IV line with practiced precision. "And they need their dad, so stay with me." When the bleeding was controlled and the IV delivering fluid, Sophia keyed her radio. "Patient stabilized for transport. Need covering fire for extraction." With suppressive fire from the base's gunners providing momentary protection, Sophia and another medic who had joined her carried the wounded soldier back to safety, his life preserved by the tourniquet that Sophia had applied under direct fire. Back at the medical facility, Dr. Levinson took over the case. "Outstanding field work, Martinez. Textbook arterial control under the worst possible conditions." The praise meant little to Sophia compared to the knowledge that a father would return to his children. As she washed blood from her hands, some of it her own from cuts she hadn't noticed receiving, she thought of Matthew and Michael and the letters she would write them tonight. For 72 hours, the attacks continued intermittently, keeping the medical team working in shifts that gradually blended together. Sophia operated on minimal sleep, moving from one critical case to another, her training and instincts carrying her through when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her conscious mind. During a rare quiet moment on the fourth day, Sophia collapsed onto her cot, too tired even to remove her boots. She pulled out the dog-eared photos of the twins that she carried everywhere, Matthew showing off a missing front tooth, Michael holding the chess trophy he'd won in his kindergarten class. "Those your kids?" asked a nurse whose bunk was adjacent to Sophia's. "Yes, they're 5 now." "They've got their father's eyes," the nurse observed innocently. Sophia's expression remained neutral. "They have my determination," she replied, and turned the photos face down, ending the conversation. Later that week, when the base had returned to its normal tense vigilance, Colonel Warren, the base commander, summoned Sophia to his office. "Specialist Martinez, your actions during the assault were noted by multiple observers," he said without preamble. "Running into active sniper fire to reach that wounded soldier showed exceptional courage." "I was just doing my job, sir." "That's what they all say." He almost smiled. "Nevertheless, I've recommended you for the Bronze Star with Valor device. The paperwork's already being processed." Sophia stood straighter, surprise momentarily breaking through her professional demeanor. A Bronze Star was a significant decoration, particularly for a woman who had been told by Robert Cunningham that she would never be adequate. That evening, during her scheduled video call with the twins, she couldn't bring herself to mention the pending decoration. Instead, she drank in the sight of them, noticing new freckles on Matthew's nose and a missing tooth in Michael's smile. "Mama, when are you coming home?" Michael asked, his blue eyes, so like Robert's, serious beyond his years. "In a few months, mijo. I'm helping people here just like I promised." "Are you being careful?" Matthew chimed in. "Tia Elena says you're where the fighting is." "I'm being very careful," Sophia assured them, swallowing past the lump in her throat. "I have to stay safe so I can come home to you." After the call ended, Sophia sat alone in the communications tent, allowing herself a rare moment of tears as she read the letters the boys had sent, drawings of their family with Sophia in uniform, standing tall between them, protecting them from an unseen world of danger. When her 6-month deployment finally ended, Sophia returned to Fort Sam Houston changed in ways both visible and invisible. The physical hardening of her body reflected the mental fortitude she had developed under fire. The Bronze Star ceremony was held with little fanfare, just another day in an army at war. But as the medal was pinned to her chest, Sophia thought of her sons waiting for her return. "This is for you," she whispered to herself, touching the medal. "I'm building something you can be proud of." As she touched the Bronze Star pinned to her dust-covered uniform, Sophia didn't imagine it would be only the first of many decorations that would transform the rejected nurse into one of the most respected officers in the Army, a future that would put her photograph in the same newspapers that would one day announce the fall of Robert Cunningham. The polished brass insignia gleamed under the ceremonial lights as Colonel Harrison pinned the lieutenant bars to Sophia's uniform. 5 years had passed since she'd first worn army green, and now she stood at attention, acutely aware of the twin 6-year-old boys watching with undisguised pride from the front row of seats. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Martinez," Colonel Harrison said, stepping back to offer a crisp salute. "Your performance during and after your deployment has been exemplary." Sophia returned the salute with precision honed through countless hours of practice. "Thank you, sir." As the small promotion ceremony concluded, Matthew and Michael rushed forward, their identical faces alight with excitement. Both boys had grown considerably during her deployment, taller, leaner, their baby fat giving way to the first hints of the men they would become. "Does this mean we have to salute you now, Mom?" Matthew asked, his eyes, so much like Robert's, twinkling with mischief. "Only if you want extra dessert," Sophia replied, kneeling to embrace them both, inhaling the clean, soapy scent of their hair. Every homecoming reminded her how precious these moments were. Later that evening, in their modest 3-bedroom home on the military base, Sophia spread her course materials across the kitchen table. The twins had finally fallen asleep after extracting promises that she would attend Michael's chess club meeting and Matthew's piano recital the following week. Her master's program in advanced trauma nursing required 20 hours of study weekly, hours she carved from her sleep time, working by lamplight while the base grew quiet around her. Every textbook, every journal article, every research paper represented another step away from the woman Robert had deemed inadequate. "A Latina without a Harvard degree will never be suitable for the Cunningham legacy," he had said that cold January morning. The memory no longer cut as it once had. Instead, it fueled her determination to excel. Robert's dismissal had become the foundation upon which she built her new life. 3 months after her promotion, Sophia sat in the elementary school auditorium, recording Matthew's piano recital on her phone. At 6 years old, her son demonstrated remarkable musical aptitude, his small fingers moving confidently across the keys as he played a Beethoven piece typically assigned to students twice his age. "He has extraordinary talent," whispered Matthew's music teacher, Ms. Abernathy, who had seated herself beside Sophia. "I've recommended him for the Young Musicians Accelerated program. It's highly competitive, but with his ability—" Sophia watched her son bow to enthusiastic applause, his serious expression breaking into a wide smile when he spotted her in the audience. Pride swelled in her chest. This child, whom Robert had considered a problem to be solved with $10,000, was blossoming into someone remarkable. The following weekend brought Michael's regional chess tournament, where her quieter, more analytical son systematically defeated opponents 2 and 3 years older than himself. His face remained impassive throughout each match, only his eyes, those Cunningham blue eyes, revealing the intensity of his concentration. When the tournament director presented Michael with the first-place trophy, nearly as tall as the boy himself, Sophia caught herself scanning the crowd of parents, irrationally expecting to see Robert. He should be here, she thought. He should see what he threw away. "They're exceptional because they believe they can be," Sophia explained to her commanding officer when he commented on the twins' achievements during her performance review. "I've never allowed them to think there are limits to what they can accomplish." "Like mother, like sons," Colonel Richards replied, closing her file. "Your own trajectory has been equally impressive, Lieutenant. Your name has come up for the Advanced Officer Training Program. If you're selected, it would put you on an accelerated path to captain." 7 months later, Sophia found herself back in Afghanistan, this time leading a medical team at a larger installation near Kandahar. Her quarters contained a small wooden table covered with framed photos of the twins, now 7, growing and thriving under the care of Tia Elena during her deployment. "Listen up," Sophia addressed her medical team during morning briefing. "Intelligence reports increased Taliban activity in the eastern sector. We can expect casualties if they attack the supply convoy scheduled for today. I want all trauma bays prepped and blood supplies checked." At 32, Lieutenant Martinez had developed a reputation for calm efficiency under pressure. Her orders were clear, her expectations high, and her medical instincts nearly infallible. The younger medics looked to her with a respect that sometimes bordered on awe. The predicted attack came just after noon, more devastating than intelligence had suggested. A massive IED followed by a coordinated assault left dozens wounded, overwhelming the medical facility within minutes. "Triage in the ambulance bay," Sophia commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Critical cases to OR 1 and 2, walking wounded to the auxiliary tent. Mason, start 2 large-bore IVs on that GSW before transport to OR." Under the harsh lights, Sophia moved from patient to patient, making split-second decisions that would determine who went to surgery first, who could wait, who needed immediate blood transfusions. Her hands remained steady even as artillery fire shook dust from the ceiling. During a momentary lull, Captain Ellison, the lead surgeon, paused beside her. "I've worked with combat nurses for 15 years, Martinez. Never seen anyone with your combination of speed and precision." Later that night, as Sophia finally returned to her quarters after 18 hours in the trauma unit, she found time for a scheduled video call with the twins. Despite her exhaustion, she brightened instantly at the sight of their faces on the screen. "How's the chess tournament going, Michael? And your recital, Matthew?" Their excited chatter about school accomplishments and daily adventures washed over her like a cleansing wave, temporarily erasing the images of broken bodies and bloodied uniforms that filled her days. When the call ended, Sophia stared at the blank screen, tears finally breaking through her professional composure. The distance from her children was the heaviest burden of her military service, yet she knew this path offered them opportunities they would never have had otherwise. 3 months into her second deployment, Sophia led a medical evacuation of critical patients during an intense firefight. When their convoy was ambushed 2 kilometers from base, she coordinated defensive positions while simultaneously treating a soldier with a sucking chest wound, using plastic packaging and tape to create an improvised chest seal that saved his life. Upon returning to Fort Sam Houston after the 9-month deployment, Sophia was greeted not only by the twins but by news that she had been selected for the elite leadership program Colonel Richards had mentioned. "Only 6 medical officers were chosen nationwide," Captain Brooks told her. "The selection board was particularly impressed by your actions during the convoy ambush. This puts you on the short list for promotion to captain." The afternoon of her graduation from the leadership program, Sophia sat in her dress uniform, watching Matthew perform with the Youth Symphony Orchestra. At 8, her son played with a sensitivity that moved the audience to tears, his slight frame nearly dwarfed by the grand piano. The following weekend found her cheering as Michael became the youngest winner of the state junior chess championship, his strategic mind navigating complexities that baffled adult players. A local newspaper photographer captured his solemn face beside the winner's trophy, those striking blue eyes serious beyond his years. As Sophia updated her journal that evening, a practice she had maintained since the twins' birth, she wrote, "Each step I climb is a reminder that limitations are only challenges to be overcome." Today, Michael was interviewed by the school newspaper. The reporter asked what he wanted to be when he grew up. He said, "Brave, like my mom." She was reviewing her doctoral application materials when the twins entered her study, unusually subdued for a Saturday morning. "Mom," Michael began, always the more direct of the two, "why don't we have a dad like the other boys?" The question froze Sophia mid-motion. She had known this day would come, had prepared for it, yet the actual moment still caught her off guard. "Everyone else has one," Matthew added quietly. "Or at least knows who he is." Sophia closed her laptop slowly, choosing her words with care. This conversation would shape how her sons viewed themselves, their worth, their origin. Robert Cunningham might have rejected them, but she would not allow his rejection to become part of their identity. As she tried to explain to her sons about their origins, Sophia didn't realize that the success she was methodically building each day was creating an inevitable collision course with Robert Cunningham, an encounter that all his money and power couldn't prevent. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of cooling coffee as she searched for the right words. The twins' question about their father hung in the air, heavier than any rucksack she'd carried in Afghanistan. At 9 years old, Matthew and Michael were too perceptive, too intelligent to be satisfied with vague answers any longer. "Is it because he died?" Michael asked, his analytical mind already working through possibilities. "Like Tommy's dad in the 3rd Infantry? No, mijo, he's not dead." Sophia took a deep breath. "He's alive, but he made a choice not to be part of our family." Matthew's brow furrowed. "Did he not want us?" The direct question pierced Sophia's heart. For years, she had protected them from this truth, but she had also raised them to value honesty. "It wasn't about you," she said carefully. "Some people aren't brave enough to be parents. When I told him I was pregnant, he wasn't courageous enough to accept that responsibility." "Was it because we're Latino?" Michael asked, his blue eyes, so like Robert's, narrowed in concentration. "Or because he was rich and you weren't?" The perceptiveness of her son's question startled Sophia. At 9, he had already observed enough of the world to understand its inequities. "He believed that people have value because of their money or social position," she explained, choosing her words carefully. "I believe people have value because of their character, their actions, and the good they bring to the world." Matthew, always more emotional than his analytical twin, moved to hug Sophia. "We don't need him. We have you." That night, after tucking the boys into bed, Sophia sat alone in her small study, surrounded by military manuals and medical journals. The twins' questions had reopened wounds she thought had long healed. Robert's cruel dismissal echoed in her memory. A Latina without a Harvard degree will never be suitable to carry the Cunningham legacy. Her phone buzzed with a notification, an email from command headquarters. The message was brief but life-changing. "Lieutenant Martinez is hereby promoted to the rank of captain, effective immediately, in recognition of exemplary service during Operation Mountain Shield." Sophia stared at the screen, momentarily stunned. At 34, she would be one of the youngest women to achieve the rank of captain in her division. The promotion came with increased responsibility, a higher security clearance, and another step up the ladder that Robert had claimed she could never climb. 3 weeks later, Sophia stood at attention as Colonel Warren pinned the captain's bars to her uniform. The ceremony was small but significant, attended by several high-ranking officers who had taken notice of her performance during her 3rd deployment. "Captain Martinez represents the best of our armed forces," General Simmons declared during his brief speech. "Her combination of technical expertise, leadership under fire, and unwavering dedication embodies the values we seek to instill in all our officers." Matthew and Michael stood in the front row, their matching navy suits a stark contrast to their sun-kissed skin. They had insisted on haircuts the day before, wanting to look official for their mother's promotion. As the ceremony concluded, they approached with perfect military posture they had practiced all week, offering salutes that made the gathered officers smile. Later that evening, Sophia found herself in her office, surrounded by paperwork for her doctoral program in military health leadership. The house was quiet, the twins finally asleep after the excitement of the day. Her laptop screen displayed her latest research paper, Trauma Response Protocols in Active Combat Zones, Improving Survival Rates Through Leadership Training. The work was demanding, requiring her to analyze complex medical data while drawing on her combat experience. Each page represented hours stolen from sleep, written in the pre-dawn quiet or late at night after the twins' bedtime. Yet it was worth every exhausted moment. The doctorate would open doors that Robert Cunningham had insisted would remain forever closed to someone like her. The following month brought unexpected news. Matthew had been accepted to a special weekend program at Juilliard for exceptionally gifted young musicians. His piano teacher had submitted recordings of his playing without telling Sophia, confident in his extraordinary talent. "Mom, I'm going to play at Juilliard," Matthew exclaimed, waving the acceptance letter. "They said I'm the youngest student they've accepted this year." The program would require monthly weekend trips to New York City, an expense and logistical challenge that Sophia immediately began planning for. Her son's gift deserved nurturing, regardless of the sacrifices required. Not to be outdone, Michael brought home news of his own 2 weeks later. His chess prowess had earned him an invitation to the National Youth Chess Championship, where he would compete against the top young players in the country. "The coach says I could be the youngest national champion in the under-12 division," he explained with the serious demeanor that was so characteristic of him. While Matthew expressed his emotions openly, Michael processed everything internally, his brilliant mind constantly calculating possibilities. As summer faded into fall, Sophia juggled her military duties, doctoral studies, and the twins' increasingly demanding schedules. Matthew's music required daily practice and monthly trips to New York. Michael's chess tournaments took them across the state and sometimes beyond. Through it all, Sophia maintained the disciplined efficiency that had become her hallmark, creating detailed calendars and backup plans for every contingency. Her reputation within the military medical community continued to grow. After successfully leading a groundbreaking field trauma protocol during her third deployment, Sophia was invited to present her findings at the Military Medical Conference in Washington, D.C. Her research on improvised medical interventions under combat conditions had saved dozens of lives and was being implemented across multiple combat zones. On a crisp October morning, as Sophia reviewed the twins' schedules for the upcoming week, her phone rang with a call from her commanding officer. "Captain Martinez, congratulations are in order," Colonel Peterson began without preamble. "You've been selected to receive the Distinguished Service Medal for your actions during the Kandahar evacuation. The ceremony will be held at Arlington Memorial Amphitheater next month." Sophia sat down, momentarily speechless. The Distinguished Service Medal was the military's third highest decoration, rarely awarded and especially uncommon for medical personnel. "The citation specifically mentions your leadership during the hospital evacuation under enemy fire," Peterson continued. 37 lives saved through your direct action. The Pentagon wants to make this a high-profile event. Expect media coverage." That evening, Sophia explained the significance of the award to the twins over dinner. "Will we get to dress up?" Matthew asked immediately, always concerned with the aesthetics of any situation. "Yes, you'll need proper suits," Sophia replied, already mentally calculating the budget adjustments this would require. "Will the president be there?" Michael wanted to know, ever practical about hierarchies and protocols. "No, but there will be generals and other important officials," Sophia explained. "It's a very formal ceremony." As she tucked them into bed that night, Matthew asked sleepily, "Are you scared to speak in front of all those important people, Mom?" Sophia smiled, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "No, mijo. After facing Taliban fighters, a room full of generals doesn't seem so intimidating." The following week, as Sophia reviewed the ceremony details, an attachment caught her attention: the list of event sponsors. There, among the corporate logos, was Cunningham Industries, Platinum Sponsor. Her heart seemed to stop momentarily as she stared at the name she had worked so hard to forget. Why now? After 9 years of silence, would she finally come face to face with Robert Cunningham again? The thought sent an unwelcome chill through her body. Would he recognize her? Would he see his own eyes reflected in the faces of the sons he had rejected? As she folded the twins' suits carefully for the ceremony, Sophia couldn't possibly foresee that fate had marked an inevitable encounter, that in just days, in the majestic setting of Arlington Memorial Amphitheater, Robert Cunningham would stand face to face not only with the woman he had abandoned, but with the children whose existence he had tried to erase. The morning of the ceremony dawned with perfect military precision: clear skies, mild temperature, and just enough breeze to make the flags snap crisply around Arlington National Cemetery. Sophia stood before the hotel mirror, methodically adjusting her dress uniform, ensuring each medal and ribbon sat exactly according to regulation. The Distinguished Service Medal she would receive today would soon join the impressive array on her chest, each one a silent rebuke to Robert's dismissal of her potential. "Mom, is this tie straight?" Matthew called from the adjoining room where both boys were struggling with their formal attire. "Coming?" Sophia replied, giving herself one final inspection before moving to assist her sons. The twins looked startlingly grown up in their matching charcoal suits, white shirts, and navy ties. At 9 years old, they had developed the lean, athletic builds that came from the structured physical activities Sophia encouraged. Matthew's artistic temperament showed in his slightly longer hair and expressive gestures, while Michael's analytical nature was evident in his precise movements and watchful eyes. "Why do we have to wear suits for this ceremony?" Matthew asked as Sophia straightened his tie. "It's different from your other medals." "Because today is very special," she explained, smoothing down his collar. "The Distinguished Service Medal is one of the highest honors a soldier can receive, and you two, as my little men, are part of that recognition." "Will there be other kids there?" Michael asked practically. "Probably not many," Sophia admitted. "These ceremonies are usually very formal and adult." "Then we'll be extra well-behaved," Michael decided, his serious expression making him look momentarily much older than 9. A knock at the door announced their military escort, Lieutenant Rivera, who would drive them to Arlington. "Captain Martinez, the car is ready whenever you are," he said, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of the impeccably dressed family. The boys looked like future officers themselves. During the drive to Arlington, Sophia reviewed her short acceptance speech mentally. She had kept it simple and professional, focusing on the team effort rather than her individual actions during the evacuation that had earned her the medal. What she hadn't prepared for, couldn't have prepared for, was the possibility of seeing Robert again after nearly a decade. The knowledge that Cunningham Industries was sponsoring the event had kept her awake for several nights. The company's involvement didn't guarantee Robert's presence, she had reasoned. As CEO, he often sent representatives to such functions. Yet something in her gut told her that this time would be different. Arlington Memorial Amphitheater stood majestically against the autumn sky, its marble columns gleaming in the morning light. As their car approached, Sophia could see military personnel in dress uniforms mingling with civilians in expensive suits, the blend of military precision and corporate wealth that characterized such events. "Captain Martinez, 5 minutes until briefing," a young lieutenant informed her as they entered the preparation area behind the amphitheater. Sophia nodded, adjusting her uniform cap. "Thank you, Lieutenant." She knelt to eye level with the twins. "You'll be sitting in the front row. Remember what we discussed about ceremony behavior?" "Yes, ma'am," they replied in unison, their synchronized response bringing a smile to her face despite her nerves. "Ready, my heroes?" she asked, her expression softening as she looked at them. "Ready, Captain," they answered with improvised salutes that made her laugh. As they walked through the corridors of the imposing complex, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The abandonment that could have destroyed her had instead become the catalyst for her reinvention. Each challenge, each obstacle overcome, had been a brick in the construction of a life she had never imagined possible. "Captain Martinez, your story is truly inspiring," commented General William Porter, who was waiting in the wings. 3 combat tours, heroic rescue of an entire platoon, and still raising 2 exemplary sons as a single mother. "It's an honor to have you in our ranks." "The honor is mine, sir," Sophia replied, unaware that in minutes she would face a different kind of battle, one for which no military training could prepare her. The amphitheater was filled to capacity with high-ranking officers, politicians, and corporate representatives. On stage, General Porter began the ceremony, highlighting the extraordinary service of the military personnel to be decorated. Sophia sat in the front row with Matthew and Michael, maintaining the erect posture characteristic of her military discipline. It is with great honor that we invite our corporate sponsor, Mr. Robert Cunningham of Cunningham Industries, to present the Distinguished Service Medal to Captain Sophia Martinez for her extraordinary bravery and leadership during Operation Guardian Shield. The name hit Sophia like a projectile. For an instant, the world seemed to freeze. A decade of mental preparation evaporated in seconds. She had never imagined that Robert would be the one to present her medal. Fate, apparently, had a sense of irony. Robert Cunningham ascended the stage with the artificial confidence of someone trying to hide larger problems. At 47, his face showed the signs of corporate stress. Cunningham Industries was under federal investigation for tax fraud and irregularities in government contracts. His 7-year marriage to a senator's daughter was crumbling amid infidelity scandals. The public appearance that day was part of a desperate strategy to restore the corporate image. When Sophia climbed the steps to the stage, followed by her sons who were to remain close for the official photograph, the shock on Robert's face was undisguisable. His body froze in absolute astonishment as he recognized the face of the woman he had discarded as inadequate 10 years earlier, now a decorated officer with 2 dark-haired boys with piercing blue eyes. His eyes, watching with admiration the mother he had never known. Captain Martinez," he stammered, trying to regain his composure, his gaze oscillating between Sophia and the twins. "Mr. Cunningham," she responded with icy formality, her eyes meeting his for the first time in a decade. The deafening applause only amplified the silence between them when their gazes finally met. Robert looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, or rather, 3. "Captain Martinez has demonstrated the highest tradition of American service," Robert read mechanically from the teleprompter, his hands trembling as he tried to process that the inadequate Latina was now receiving the 2nd highest military decoration in the country, while his own company faced fraud investigations. Her courage under enemy fire saved 17 lives and... He momentarily lost the thread of the reading, his gaze fixed on the twins. They were his exact copy at the same age, the same eyes, the same chin, the same arched eyebrows. There could be no possible doubt. Sophia remained impassive, years of military discipline allowing her to control every facial muscle as Robert placed the medal on her uniform. To spectators, it was just another ceremony. For the 2 of them, it was an emotional earthquake. At the cocktail reception that followed the ceremony, the tension was palpable. Robert, clearly shaken, kept his distance, observing Sophia interact with generals and senators with the ease of someone who belonged in that environment. The twins, polite and articulate, impressed the guests with their precocious maturity. "Those boys are extraordinary," commented a senator near Robert. "Captain Martinez raised them alone while serving in combat zones. I heard they both have IQs above 140. The older one was accepted into a special program for young prodigies at Juilliard, and the younger one is a national youth chess champion." Robert swallowed hard, the champagne glass trembling slightly in his hand. Each word was a stab of regret. Those were his sons, the Cunningham legacy he had so cruelly rejected, flourishing without him, perhaps even despite him. Finally, when the hall began to empty, Robert approached Sophia stealthily as she conversed with a colonel. He waited for her to finish and, when they were relatively isolated, spoke in a low voice. "Sophia, I had no idea." "That's Captain Martinez to you, Mr. Cunningham," she corrected, her voice professional but cutting. "They are—" He couldn't complete the sentence, his eyes fixed on the twins who were animatedly conversing with a group of officers a few meters away. "They're my sons," she answered simply. "I can finally take financial responsibility for the boys," offered Robert, resorting to the only resource he had always used to solve problems: money. Sophia looked at him with a gaze that combined pity and determination. "Matthew and Michael have everything they need, a mother who loves them, a career that supports them, and a country that values our service more than any bank account could buy." At that moment, the twins approached, curious about the man talking to their mother. "Mom, General Porter said we can visit the flight simulator next month," commented Matthew enthusiastically. Michael, always the more observant, studied Robert with disconcerting intensity. "Are you the man from the company that's sponsoring the event?" Robert nodded, unable to formulate words before those eyes, his eyes that examined him with intelligence beyond their age. "Mom, is this the man you said wasn't brave enough to be our father?" Michael asked innocently, his prodigious memory retrieving a conversation from years ago when Sophia had finally explained to her sons about their origin. The silence that followed was deafening. Several nearby guests turned around, the surrounding conversation diminishing in volume. Robert paled, the mask of corporate confidence completely crumbling. Sophia straightened her shoulders with the same determination that had carried her through battlefields and operating rooms, and declared in a clear voice, "That's Captain Martinez to you, Mr. Cunningham. And just to be clear, it's not your money they've missed, but the opportunity to know two extraordinary young Americans who learned that true value lies in character, not in the Cunninghams of this world." While the camera flashes illuminated the hall and whispers spread like wildfire, Sophia couldn't imagine that her simple affirmation of truth would trigger a media storm that, in just 72 hours, would transform her private story into a national symbol of resilience, and the Cunningham empire into a synonym for corporate hypocrisy. Her voice, though controlled, carried the authority of someone who had commanded men in combat. It wasn't vengeance. It was a statement of facts. The gazes of those present, including several journalists, fixed on the scene as understanding of the personal drama spread through the hall like wildfire. The silence that followed Sophia's declaration stretched for what felt like an eternity. Robert stood frozen, his face drained of color, as the murmurs began to ripple through the elegant reception hall. A nearby journalist from the Washington Post discreetly activated the voice recorder on her phone, her eyes widening at the unexpected drama unfolding before her. "I believe my mother asked you to address her as Captain Martinez," Michael added, his analytical mind registering the man's failure to acknowledge the correction. Though only 9, his posture mirrored his mother's military bearing, shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes direct. Robert's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, a CEO suddenly stripped of his most valuable asset, control. The expensive Italian suit that had projected authority minutes earlier now seemed to hang awkwardly on his frame. "Boys, perhaps you should try some of that chocolate fountain before it's gone," suggested General Porter, who had approached unnoticed during the confrontation. His voice was kind, but his eyes conveyed understanding to Sophia. He was offering her children an escape from the tension. "May we, Mom?" Matthew asked, his artistic sensitivity making him more aware of the emotional undercurrents. "Of course," Sophia nodded, her composure never wavering. "Stay within sight." As the twins walked away, escorted by an aide, Robert finally found his voice. "You had no right to keep them from me," he hissed, low enough that only Sophia could hear. "I had every right," she replied calmly. "You made your position abundantly clear 10 years ago. A problem you need to solve yourself, I believe were your exact words." A flash of recognition crossed his face. "People change, Sophia. That's still Captain Martinez to you," she corrected again. "And yes, people do change. I certainly have. My sons have grown into remarkable young men. And you've gone from rising CEO to a man under federal investigation for fraud. Interesting trajectories, wouldn't you say?" Across the room, Senator James Whitmore observed the interaction with narrowed eyes. His daughter, Robert's current wife Catherine, beside him, her expression hardening as she noted the resemblance between her husband and the twins now happily sampling desserts. "Those boys," the senator said quietly. "They look remarkably like you, Robert. Something you forgot to mention before you married my daughter?" Robert's neck flushed red above his starched collar. "James, I can explain." "I sincerely doubt that," the senator interrupted, his political smile never reaching his eyes. "Catherine, I believe we should depart. My office will be in touch, Mr. Cunningham, regarding certain adjustments to our arrangements." As the senator and his daughter departed with frigid dignity, a photographer from the Associated Press captured the moment. Robert standing between his retreating wife and the decorated officer who had once been dismissed from his life, his expression a perfect study in public humiliation. Sophia accepted a glass of water from a passing server, her movements unhurried. The years of operating under fire had taught her an invaluable lesson. When your opponent is self-destructing, simply step back and let it happen. "That photograph will make an interesting addition to tomorrow's coverage of the ceremony," observed Colonel Rivera, appearing at Sophia's side. "Your medal is well-deserved, Captain, but I suspect the stories about you will focus on more than your military achievements." "I never sought publicity, sir," Sophia replied. "No," he agreed, "but sometimes justice finds its own spotlight." Later that evening, as Sophia tucked the twins into bed in their hotel room, Michael asked the question she had been expecting. Was that really him? Our biological father? Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. Yes, that was Robert Cunningham. "He looked scared of you," Matthew observed, a hint of pride in his voice. "Not scared," Sophia corrected gently. "Perhaps just realizing what he walked away from." "Will we have to see him again?" Michael asked, his practical mind already assessing future scenarios. "That would be your choice, not his," Sophia assured them. "No one can force you to have a relationship with him." "I don't think I want to," Matthew said quietly. "He made you cry. Tia Elena told us once." Sophia brushed the hair from his forehead. "That was a long time ago, mijo. What matters is that we built a good life together, the three of us." After the boys fell asleep, Sophia stood at the hotel window, looking out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the night sky. Her phone buzzed with a text from her commanding officer. "Heads up, story breaking on social media. Prepare for press interest tomorrow." She wasn't surprised. There had been too many witnesses, too many influential people who had overheard the exchange. In the age of instant communication, such a dramatic confrontation, involving a decorated military officer, a CEO under investigation, and abandoned children, was irresistible fodder for the news cycle. True to prediction, by morning, the first stories appeared online. By afternoon, as they boarded their flight back to Fort Belvoir, the narrative had crystallized. War hero reveals, CEO abandoned pregnant girlfriend, discovers twin sons at medal ceremony. The Washington Post led with a particularly devastating juxtaposition. A photograph of Sophia in full dress uniform receiving her medal alongside an older image of Robert at a charity gala captioned, "Captain Martinez rose from abandoned single mother to decorated officer while Cunningham faces fraud allegations." In the days that followed, the story metastasized across media platforms. Financial news focused on the immediate 5% drop in Cunningham Industries stock following the revelation. Gossip columns detailed Catherine Cunningham's hasty departure to her family's Martha's Vineyard estate. Military publications celebrated Sophia's extraordinary rise through the ranks while raising two exceptional children alone. By the fourth day, Sophia's office voicemail was full of interview requests, which she systematically declined. The twins were excused from school to avoid media attention, though Michael pragmatically pointed out that the publicity might help his chess sponsorship opportunities. On the fifth day, a certified letter arrived from Donovan and Associates, a prestigious Boston law firm representing Robert Cunningham. Sophia read it once, then placed it in her desk drawer without comment. The legal threats and financial offers it contained deserved neither her anxiety nor her consideration. That evening, as she prepared dinner in their comfortable but modest base housing, Sophia's phone rang with a familiar number, her commanding officer. "Captain Martinez, the Pentagon PR office is fielding dozens of media requests about your situation," Colonel Peterson informed her. "Normally, we'd advise keeping quiet, but in this case they believe a single controlled interview might actually help quell the feeding frenzy. Would you consider speaking with Leslie Nakano from National Public Radio? She's respected, fair, and won't sensationalize your story. Sophia considered the request as she stirred the simmering arroz con pollo. Would this be beneficial to the army, sir? Frankly, yes, he admitted. Your story resonates with people. Single mother, immigrant background, rising through merit to become a decorated officer, while the wealthy CEO who abandoned you faces legal troubles. It's practically a recruitment advertisement for everything the modern military stands for. 2 days later, Sophia sat across from Leslie Nakano in a carefully arranged interview at the base. She answered questions with the same direct honesty she had always shown her sons, neither embellishing Robert's cruelty nor minimizing her own struggles. "What would you say to Robert Cunningham now if he were listening?" Nakano asked toward the end of the interview. Sophia paused thoughtfully. "I would thank him," she finally said. "Thank him?" Nakano couldn't hide her surprise. "Yes," Sophia nodded. "His rejection forced me to find strength I didn't know I possessed. Had he accepted us into his world, I might never have discovered what I was truly capable of accomplishing on my own terms." The interview aired nationally the following week, the same day that Catherine Cunningham's divorce filing became public record, citing humiliation and moral turpitude as grounds. The same day that Cunningham Industries board called an emergency meeting to discuss Robert's future as CEO. While the cameras captured what appeared to be a ceremonial moment, no one realized they were documenting the beginning of a social earthquake that would shake the foundations of the Cunningham empire and rewrite the history of a family that should never have been separated. The Washington Post headline screamed across newsstands nationwide, "Hero of War reveals, Cunningham CEO abandoned family." The front page story featured a split image. Sophia in her decorated uniform beside a photo of Robert looking shell-shocked at the Arlington ceremony. Within hours, every major news outlet had picked up the story, each adding their own angle to the unfolding drama. In the sleek Cunningham Industries headquarters, executives huddled in crisis meetings as the company's stock plummeted another 12% by closing bell. Financial analysts openly questioned whether the company could weather both the fraud investigation and this new public relations disaster. The hashtag #Cunningham abandoned them trended for 3 consecutive days. Sophia had declined all interview requests beyond her single controlled NPR appearance. Instead, she focused on her sons, shielding them from the media frenzy while maintaining their routine. Matthew still practiced piano each afternoon. Michael continued his chess matches online. Their lives, built with such careful precision, would not be disrupted by Robert Cunningham a second time. Catherine Cunningham's divorce petition landed like another body blow to Robert's crumbling empire. The document, conveniently leaked to the press, cited humiliation, moral turpitude, and undisclosed prior paternity as grounds. Senator Whitmore held a press conference expressing profound disappointment in his soon-to-be former son-in-law, effectively severing the political connections Robert had cultivated through the marriage. 1 week after the Arlington confrontation, the Cunningham Industries board convened an emergency session. The meeting lasted 7 hours. When it concluded, a terse statement announced that Robert Cunningham would take a leave of absence to address personal matters, while the company conducted an internal review of its leadership structure. Sophia learned about these developments the same way everyone else did, through news alerts on her phone. She felt no satisfaction watching Robert's carefully constructed world collapse. Her victory had come years earlier, when she'd rebuilt her life on her own terms. 7 days after the board meeting, a military police officer appeared at Sophia's office door at Fort Belvoir. "Captain Martinez, there's a civilian at the main gate requesting to see you. He's been denied entry as he's not on your approved visitor list. A Mr. Robert Cunningham." Sophia looked up from her medical research, momentarily surprised. "Did he say what he wants?" "He claims he wants to see his sons, ma'am. He's quite insistent." Says he has legal rights. After a moment's consideration, Sophia nodded. Have him escorted to the administration building. I'll meet him there. Robert looked diminished as he sat in the sparse waiting room, his bespoke suit hanging slightly loose on his frame. The past week had aged him visibly. New lines etched around his eyes, his once confident posture now curved inward. When Sophia entered, dressed in her everyday uniform, he stood quickly. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. "What do you want, Mr. Cunningham?" Sophia remained standing, maintaining both physical and emotional distance. "I came to see my sons," he declared, attempting to sound determined but achieving only a tone of desperation. "I have legal rights." Sophia observed him calmly. The man before her seemed smaller than in her memories, not just physically, but in presence. Recent news had not been kind. Temporarily removed as CEO, abandoned by his political wife, investigated for corporate fraud. "Matthew and Michael know who you are biologically," she responded. "If they wish to know you, I won't prevent it. But it will be their decision, not yours or mine." "Why did you never contact me?" Robert asked, his former arrogance replaced by genuine perplexity. "For child support, for recognition." "Because I promised myself my sons would never depend on someone who considered them a mistake," Sophia answered. "Those $10,000 you gave me? They're in a savings account for their college education, untouched. With interest, it's almost $15,000 now, probably enough to cover textbooks for their first semester at Harvard." Robert paled at the implication. She had never needed his money. The inadequate Latina he had discarded had built a respectable career, raised exceptional children, and earned national recognition, all without a cent beyond that initial payment he had offered as a final solution. "I want to be part of their lives," he insisted. "I can offer opportunities, connections." "The same connections you thought I didn't deserve access to?" Sophia interrupted. "Matthew and Michael don't need the Cunningham connections. They're building their own path." At that moment, the door opened and the twins entered. They wore the uniforms of the military school they attended, with straight postures and curious gazes. "Boys, Mr. Cunningham would like to meet you officially," said Sophia. "The decision is yours." Matthew, always the more direct one, stepped forward. "Why now? After 10 years? Robert opened his mouth, but no convincing answer emerged. How could he explain to 10-year-old children that he had rejected them because their mother didn't have the appropriate social pedigree? How could he justify that he only wanted to know them now when his empire was crumbling? "You're extraordinary," was all he managed to say. "I'd like to get to know you better." Michael, the analytical one, studied the man before him. "Mom always said you made your decision, and that we should respect decisions, even when we disagree with them." "Can we think about it?" asked Matthew, looking at his mother. "Of course you can," Sophia replied, proud of her son's maturity. When the boys left, Robert remained silent for long moments. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," he finally admitted. "No," Sophia replied, standing to end the meeting. "You made a decision based on your values at that moment. I also made mine. The difference is that I've never regretted mine." The following week, Robert received a formal email from Sophia with a schedule of possible supervised visits with the twins, 2 hours per month initially. It was more than he deserved and less than he wanted. However, for the first time in his privileged life, Robert Cunningham faced something that his money and influence couldn't buy: the respect and love of his sons, which would have to be earned with time and actions, not empty promises. Meanwhile, Sophia's life continued its course. Promoted to major, she was assigned to lead an innovative trauma medical program that would revolutionize care for wounded soldiers. Her sons continued to flourish, occasionally mentioning "that man, Mr. Cunningham," after their rare visits, but always returning to the safety and stability of the home Sophia had built. On an autumn afternoon, almost a year after the encounter at Arlington, Sophia received a call informing her that Robert had suffered a heart attack. It wasn't severe, but had served as a health warning. "Should we visit him?" Matthew asked during dinner after Sophia shared the news. "If you want to," she answered. "He seems so lonely," observed Michael, "even with all that money." Sophia smiled gently. "Sometimes people confuse success with happiness, wealth with value. The real wealth is sitting at this table now." That night, Sophia found the twins writing a get-well card for Robert. There was no resentment in her heart as she watched them. The man who had once discarded her as inadequate now struggled to find a place in the lives of the children she had raised alone. It wasn't vengeance. It was simply the natural course of life, where each choice brings its consequences. For Sophia Martinez, the circle was complete. The abandonment that could have destroyed her became the catalyst for her transformation. Pain converted to purpose, and the children Robert had considered a mistake became the greatest success of her life. As she closed the photo album showcasing her journey from abandoned young nurse to respected military officer, Sophia reflected that, in the end, there were no winners or losers in this story, just people making choices and living with them. And in that, she had chosen better. While closing the photo album that documented her extraordinary journey, from the abandoned young nurse to the respected Major Martinez, Sophia understood that her story wasn't about revenge or victory, but about choices and consequences, and that the true Cunningham legacy wasn't in Robert's fortune, but in the character of two extraordinary young men who carried those blue eyes with a worldview that money could never buy. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.